for the waiting, and we were like trying to solve the technical problems. It was very unexpected.
Because just to be sure it's not me. Then,
yeah. Okay. 怡蓉可以开始了吗？Okay, finally we are here. Okay. So let's
Eccoci. Mi senti?
Sì, tutto bene.
Che bello. Ciao, come va?
Ciao, tutto bene, grazie.
Non so che è successo perché facciamo queste dirette ormai da 3 mesi, ma non era mai successa una cosa del genere. Vabbè, c'è sempre una prima volta. Okay, we're gonna start. We're gonna start speaking in English, so you want to start? Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. 好的，欢迎大家陆续进入直播间，也让大家久等了。今天呢，我们非常有幸的请到了陈酒自然酒的顶级天花板名家 Radikon。那么在上一期呢，我们也跟大家有过分享陈酒和自然酒这个主题。那么，所以我相信今天的直播间当中会有很多的热爱自然酒和陈酒的朋友们。那么今天我们也会和大家分享很多有趣的故事。今天Sasha 来到了我们的直播间，然后在我旁边的同样是Ian Dagata 先生。那么
晚上好 Very happy to be here, and sorry we're a little late, but we had a technical problem. Very happy to be with Sasha Radikon of the Radikon estate, one of the leading estates in Italy, but also one of the leading world estates when it comes to non-interventionist winemaking and making wines that are pure and natural. And Radikon is one of the famous names of Friuli Venezia Giulia, which is the region in northeastern Italy that has always been considered to be the birthplace of the renaissance of Italian white wines, but also makes some fantastic red wines from both native and international wine grapes.
陈酒呢，也就是英文当中的 orange wine 或者是 amber wine， 有很多热爱自然酒的朋友会特别喜欢。为什么呢？它其实是用白葡萄酒通过长时间的浸皮而做成的。那么 Radikon 呢，我们今天采访到的就是位于意大利 Friuli 产区的一个顶级名家，他们的陈酒当你喝过之后一定会对这个品类产生深深的眷恋感和深深的印象啊。所以我们今天呢就会给大家争取到了非常多的来自 Radikon 的不同的系列其中有白，然后也有红。那么今天呢，大家可以先点击屏幕下方的 Bubble 赏原知味，然后添加我们的企业微信，有很多的官方配额在这个企业微信当中等着大家。
Quindi, carissimo, raccontaci, tell us a little bit about your estate and your father Stanco and how the Radikon estate shifted so much over the years, reaching the position it has today.
Well, first, thank you for having me for this tasting. And yeah, basically our estate starts with my grandfather, which he bought the land in Oslavia, near Gorizia. It's extremely northeast of Italy, very close to Slovenian border. My grandfather bought the land. My grandfather bought the land. My grandfather was started making some wine, which he sold only to local restaurant as open wine. And then my father did the biggest job. He started bottling in 1980, then more than 40 years ago. And basically from that years, we always keep bottling. Yeah, if you want to translate.
Okay, sure. 这家陈酒标杆大家已经非常熟悉的 Radikon 呢，它的历史可以追溯到1861年，然后当时的 在19世纪80年代，他的父辈庄主，也就是 Stanko Radikon 呢，他酿造了第一个年份的 Radikon， 也就是在40年前。然后今天呢，我们可以看到有很多其他不同的品种。
So your father was, of course, Stanislaw or Stanko. What was your great-grandfather and your grandfather's name?
It was my grandfather's name was Miklus Franz, and my grandfather's name was Edoardo Radikon.
Eduardo, okay. And but in 1980, you started estate bottling, and at that time, you were making wines that are somewhat the same that you were making today, because already back then you were making Enoslavia, Ribolla Gialla, and so on and so forth.
At the beginning, my father started to make this more or less the same wines we do. He was keeping with Ribolla Gialla, which was it is a local variety, which in that period nobody really trusts in that grape. But he was making the wines in like a normal way. Let me say, he was making wines in at the beginning, some in stainless steel, then fresh wines, which was the trend of Friuli in that period. Then in the late 80s, he started to move to the system of using barriques, French barriques for the vinification, more in French style. And at the middle 90s, he started to think about that he wants more from this grape. And this was the period when the skin contact, the orange wines have the rebirth from old techniques.
Okay.
在1980年的时候，Radikon 呢已经开始了用本土品种酿造，比方说 Ribolla Gialla， 在今天也是非常受欢迎的一个品种，以及它当时使用的都是不锈钢罐。因为在当时的话，在 Friuli 这个产区，其实使用不锈钢罐是一个非常先进的，并且可以让酒体保持非常多的清新度的这样一个前沿的酿酒手法。那么在19世纪的后半段呢，当时他的Shasa 提到了他的 grandfather 的名字呢，就是 Nicola Franz， 和他的祖父呢是叫 Eduardo。他当时呢，他们就选择了用法桶去陈酿。那么这个转变，其实在当时也是一个非常先进、非常先锋的一个酿酒手法。
Okay.
And yeah, if in the 95 we started to do the first orange wines, and can you imagine 95 he started. My father, when he thinks something, he just tried. And he tried with half of our Ribolla in that period in 95. He made the first skin contact wine, thinking about the techniques which my grandfather was using before. And basically he put the skins together with the juice to ferment for 1 week. And he did this first wine. Then in 96, we had hail. Then we didn't produce any wine. He basically had more than two years to think about this wine, and he really fell in love with this style.
在1995年的时候呢 Stanko 他就以这种方式去酿造了Ribolla Gialla 这种品种，这个也是现代橘酒的一个最早期的尝试。那么Ribolla 的皮呢，它非常的厚，所以 Stanko 他当时就意识到了说，我们可以通过浸皮这种手法，可以让它有更多的复杂性和更强的結構感。Yeah.
Okay. And how many wines were you making? Different wines were you making before 95, 96? And how many did you decide to make after that?
In the period where we did wines made with barriques and with the French style, we had Sauvignon, we had Chardonnay, we had Pinot Grigio, and we had basically all the international varieties. And near today, this was Tokai Friulano, Ribolla Gialla, and basically for the reds was only Merlot. After when my father completely switched to orange wines, he decided to make only 2 wines from whites and 1 red, which was still the Merlot. And he was making Ribolla Gialla and Oslawie, which is the blend made with Chardonnay, Sauvignon, and Pinot Grigio. And this was basically in that period, we only had 3 wines on the list.
Mm-hmm.
After we moved again a little bit, and then we basically add some wines. My father added the Tokai, the Yakot in 2001. And I added another few wines in the next years.
Mm-hmm.
Which ones did you add?
My first project was the S line. Then I started to make Slatnik and Sivi, which is a Pinot Grigio, from 2009. And then the last years, I added 1 red in this group of wines. And basically, Slatnik and Sivi, they was born to be an introduction for orange wines. And in the same way with the red Hiborns, it's RS. It's born in the same way to be an introduction to our red wines, a little bit less extreme than shorter skin contact and shorter aging.
这里呢，Sasha 刚刚在跟我们介绍了一下，他其实在父辈的基础上，他又开发了带有自己特色的全新的子标产品线。那么我们今天在直播间也为大家带来了这一支子标的，这支呢是 Pinot Grigio 的值，非常特别，非常特殊，而且因为 Pinot Grigio 它是有点粉色的皮啊，所以呢倒出来的酒液大家可以看到是那种充满着少女感的这种粉橘色。Sasha 呢，他开发的这个子标产品线呢，它有一个非常显著的特点，就是它缩短了浸皮的时间，然后呢，陈酿的时间也会比其他的系列会更短一些，导致呢，它所有当你喝进去的时候，它就是非常清新、非常轻盈的一个特点。那么在这个子标也叫做 Linear S， 它是在 Sivi 是在09年首发的第1个年份。然后同时它也有Slatnik 和 RS 2个不同的在子标当中的一个产品。子标当中呢，它是1年的统陈，然后呢有差不多4个月左右的平陈的时间。等一下呢，Sasha 会跟我们分享一些图片啊，就是酒庄所用的橡木桶。
But you know, the Slatnik name, in reality, if I'm not wrong, I remember that it was already used in your estate in the 1980s. So you took it back, right?
We are really right. Yeah, my father's first blend was named Slatnik.
Yeah.
Slatnik is basically a name of a vineyard, and when he stopped having Tokai Friulano, he decided to don't do it Slatnik again. And basically, when I started to do my wine, I realized that the blend is very similar of what he was doing in the 80s. And then we talked together and we decided to take this name back to the market. And this is why he gave me his own name
yeah.
Yeah.
No, that was a great wine. I remember drinking it in the 1980s at the Enoteca Ruffi Isabelli in Rome. And it was one of my favorite wines at the time, you know, that Terre Alte, more or less, the Ribolla by Gravner. Those were more or less the wines that people were drinking. Yeah.
Slatnik 刚刚伊恩有问到这个产品啊，因为 Slatnik 其实是在1980年的时候，也就是 Sasha 的父亲，他当时呢就已经有这个名称了。那么这个名称呢，其实是用来当时的一个混酿，也是 Tokai Friulano 的，它同时它的一个葡萄园的名称。然后这一款相对来说它是非常这个集中度非常高，然后呢同时它也是 当地非常有名的一种本土葡萄品种，所以是极具特点。同时呢，也是橘酒当中大家不可错过的一个系列。
And how many hectares do you have now of vines, and how many bottles a year do you make?
The estate grown up last 6 years a lot. Then from the 12 hectares, we worked together with my father in 2016. We have now more or less 24 hectares. And the year production for this year is difficult to say, but because we just grow up for another 5 hectares this year, but
Sure.
the production will be around 90,000 bottles. Everything
Okay.
goes well.
90,000 bottles. Good. I saw you showed some photos of the skins macerating. Is that right?
Absolutely, yes. All we do with the maceration, it's made in oak vats that you see in the photos. And the photos they showed when we punch down. Basically, all our grapes are worked and we destamped and put in these vats for the fermentation. The fermentation is obviously spontaneous. And during the first 10 days, we do this work from 2-3 times a day to mix basically everything we can to extract better and to mix the juice with the skins to extract as much as we can.
那么酒庄呢，从最开始的12公顷一直发展到今天已经有差不多24公顷了。那么因为每年的天气状况不同啊，所以呢酒庄的产量其实是会有一些浮动。那么像今天我们差不多在 Radikon 的酒庄的产量是在9万瓶左右，其实是非常少的。Radikon 也是以高质优产并且呢低产的这样一个思路，所以今天我们喝到的以及我们直播间的每一瓶配额都是非常的滴珍贵。
Okay, so start talking about the wines then maybe.
Sure.
Let's start talking about the wines. Want to begin with the Ribolla or which one do you want to begin with?
We can start with the Pinot Grigio. CV.
Okay, so let's start talking about the wines. Let's talk about then the Pinot Grigio, the CV. CV is Slovenian for Pinot Grigio, right?
Yes, CV Pinot in Slovenian, it's Pinot Grigio. We use this name because we are very well connected to Slovenia, and I think that it's even important to have this name. CV, it's 100% Pinot Grigio, as I told you, and it's made with skin contact, which stays between 8 to 10 days. Then after these 10 days, the grapes go to the press, and the wine stay in wood for 1 year. Then after 1 year in wood, we racked in stainless steel, and a few months in stainless steel and a few months in bottle, and then the wine is ready for release.
Okay.
第一款我们的小助手呢，可以在屏幕下方或者是大家可以点击屏幕下方的企业微信来购买我们今天的第一款橘酒，也是我们橘酒爱好者入门必入的这一款，因为相信喝过这一款酒的人无人不爱。那么这一款呢是由100%的黑皮诺酿造而成的。2020年，这一款CV 为什么叫 CV 呢 ？CV 是在斯洛文尼亚语当中的这个 Pinot Grigio 的意思，也就是灰皮诺。因为 Radikon 呢，其实它的家族最早是来自于斯洛文尼亚的，所以这个也是他们为了致敬传统、致敬这个古法酿造的一个而保留下来的名称。那么在这个 CV 这款酒当中呢，我们使用的是8到10天的浸皮，所以你可以感觉到它和其他系列的不同，它没有那么重的这种单宁感，它是更多的一个优雅清新，而且呢会给你那种吞的感觉。经过这个压醪之后，所有的是1年的桶陈，然后呢就到了这个不锈钢罐当中进行陈酿。 所以这一款是推荐大家今天晚上我们给大家带来了20支的配额。那么这个20支呢，我们今天给大家争取到了最好的价格，也就是520元啊，所以大家爱举酒的朋友们赶紧下手啊。然后今天晚上我们在9点钟的时候也会给大家抽奖，幸运观众啊，请大家持续关注。
And the Pinot Grigio, the grapes come from where? All around Oslavia or other areas too?
They are all around from Oslavia. All our vineyards are 2.5 kilometers from our cellar. Then everything is on a hilly side and everything is here around. Absolutely. Okay. The idea of Pinot Grigio and Slatnik was to create 2 wines to be an introduction for orange wines. If we go back in the late 2000, these wines, they born in 2009. If we think what the market was in that period for us, for our wines, it was very particular market because only the people who knows about orange wine, they was drinking orange wines. And what I was thinking in that period was we need something which is a little bit less extreme to make the people appreciate better the orange wines. And this is why I produced these 2 wines with the idea of shorter skin contact and shorter aging in bottle.
那么我们观众朋友当中呢 Andrew 其也提到了这个更加易饮好喝，这个也是 Sasha 刚才提到的一个观点，就是他在2009年的时候，他在想说要创造这个子标的 S 产品线的时候， Slatnik、CV 和 RS 都是更缩短的浸皮时间，然后呢让陈酒更加易饮，也让更多的人可以入门陈酒并且爱上陈酒，所以我相信这一款是很多入门并且是专业爱好者非常爱的一款。
CV Pinot Grigio, it's a variety that I think does very well when it's macerated. There are a number of Pinot Grigios made this way that are really very, very good wines. Granted, it's basically a red grape, so the color of the wine is going to be pink to dark pink. But it just seems that a lot of Pinot Grigios that are macerated do remarkably well. Historically, in Friuli Venezia Giulia, there was the habit of macerating Pinot Grigio and making Aromato wine. So it's a grape that has always been used locally in this sense. And it's interesting because it is a fairly thin-skinned grape, so you have to have very good viticulture in order to macerate it. So that's something that speaks well to your talents.
Yeah, I mean, I think that really Pinot Grigio needs to be, the viticulture should be very good, not only for Pinot Grigio, but for all the orange wines. And I think that Pinot Grigio is have very good results in maceration because this, it's like halfway grape, let me say it. In between reds and whites, it is very interesting to be macerated because you can feel this first flavors of reds and still a white wine. It's interesting to extract and to have this in the grapes. There's few very good Pinot Grigios with skin contact in the region, I think. And yes. Many people and more people are doing that.
第一款呢，我们的 Pinot Grigio 正因为它是一个粉色的葡萄品种，是非常特别的一种种类。那么刚刚Ian也提到了一点，就是 Pinot Grigio 的这个葡萄品种的一个很大的特性就是它的皮非常的薄，那么这个也为种植葡萄的种植带来了很多的挑战性的因素。这个也是 Sasha 能够为我们带来这么精彩的酒款，也是非常非常很难种植，但是它可以显出非常好的品种特性的一款。那么一方面是它可以带来很多的风土表现力，另外一方面呢，它既有红葡萄酒的这种单宁感，同时呢又有白葡萄酒的这种清新以及呢柑橘类的水果的感觉啊。特别是提到的是它可能会有一点点草莓的这种感觉。
Yeah, it's a very pure, very beautiful, very pretty wine. This is a 2020, and has a really lovely note of, like we said, of red berries, of strawberries, and it's really like a fruit juice almost. It's very easy to drink and very, very enjoyable.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was really like juicy and super like appetizer, and you would love to drink it more and more and again.
Yeah, no, I think Pinot Grigio really is a jack of all trades, grape variety. You can make very good classic white wines with it. You can make pink wines, and macerated it does very, very well. It's actually a very good grape, the reputation of which has been somewhat ruined by too many cheap, neutral, industrial wines, because in fact, the grape variety is a noble grape variety. There are many fantastic Pinot Grigio wines made in Alsace and all over the world. So it really deserves to be better thought of and appreciated.
灰皮诺这种葡萄品种呢，其实早在阿尔萨斯，很多产区其实它都是被誉为是贵族葡萄品种的，所以在今天，当然我们并没有看到灰皮诺是被放在一个非常重要的位置，但是实际上呢，这种葡萄品种它可以酿造出的葡萄酒的品质可谓是高中还有高中手。那么在今天我们能够尝到从意大利 Friuli 的这一片风土上面，并且呢用最极大的最适合 Pinot Grigio 这一种葡萄品种的酿造手段，可以突出它的品种特点，以及呢可以让大家尝到最极致的 Pinot Grigio 的这种 flavor， 其实是一个非常非常难能可贵的一件事情。
Then maybe we can talk about the two Ribolla Giallas. They're two very different wines, but it's probably good to talk about them together. Ribolla Gialla is one of my favorite wine grapes of all. It's intimately linked to Friuli Venezia Giulia, but especially linked to the area of Oslavia. What's important for the people listening to us to understand and to realize is that Oslavia is really a Grand Cru area for Ribolla Gialla. Another one in Friuli Venezia Giulia might be Rosazzo in the Colli Orientali, but certainly Oslavia is really the most famous area for Ribolla Gialla in Italy. It's really a grand cru for the variety, and the Radikon is like lucky to be located right there. So the best Ribolla Gialla wines in Italy really come from this area. And Ribolla Gialla is a noble variety that needs to be probably, to give the best wines, grown in hillside vineyards from low yields, old vines, and not in flatland vineyards where it is allowed to yield too highly. When Ribolla Gialla is treated correctly, it gives one of Italy's greatest white wines. And you make two of them, and we can begin with the Ribolla Gialla 2017, which maybe is really the symbol of your winery, no?
Absolutely. Ribolla Gialla, it is one of the varieties who really needs hillside. It needs to be planted on the top of the hills. Even in Oslavia, you can't plant Ribolla Gialla everywhere. You should plant it where it's more sun, where it's more light, and when it's more well exposed on southeast vineyards. It needs this particular soil which we have in Oslavia. It's called ponca, which is basically a flesh, which is clay, but very particular and mineral clay. This soil is giving to the vines of Ribolla in particular much more minerality to the grapes, which is after that going through and coming to the wines. You can feel the minerality and the acidity of the wine. These wines can, if you think that 15 years ago Ribolla Gialla was basically only on the hills, and now last year they start to plant on the flat. to make basically bubbles, but this is completely different wine, I think. And Ribolla can really express the best of the Don grape only on the hills. Ribolla, it's even the reason why my father started to do the skin contact again, because Ribolla has a very thick skin and needs to be, with this skin needs to be extracted in some way. The idea is to extract as much as we can thanks to the maceration. Only maceration can extract all these flavors from the skins of Ribolla, which is the biggest part of the taste of the grape.
首先我们来介绍一下 Ribolla Gialla 这种葡萄品种，因为 Ribolla Gialla 在当地也是一个非常重要的贵族品种。在 Friuli 呢有一块特级园，那么这块非常重要的特级园呢被命名为 Oslavia。Oslavia 呢是非常这个特级园当中的一块特级园啊。那么所以今天我们能够有幸的在直播间为大家争取到2款都是由Friuli 的 Oslavia 的特级园来产出的。那么在 Radikon 呢，这个2款当中为什么非常的特别，以及它可以很成功的陈年，被誉为是陈酒当中的最伟大、最具陈年潜力的酒。那么有几个方面的原因，一个方面原因呢是在这里的Ribolla Gialla 它的产量非常的低，然后呢它也是老藤的 Ribolla Gialla 也是非常稀有的，非常难找到的。另外一个呢 Ribolla Gialla 它在不同的坡度在这个山坡上的时候呢，它对于风土的表现力是非常强的。那么当然 Sasha 刚刚也有提到在近几年的时候，你也可以看到 Ribolla Gialla 在一些平地上 flatland 它也有一些种植，但是呢这些 Ribolla Gialla 更多的是用来酿造起泡酒，而不是我们今天喝到的这一些非常高端、非常具有集中度和复杂度的陈酒。那么这个是我们对于 Ribolla Gialla 的一个大致的理解。另外呢，我们再来讲一下今天我们为大家带来的 Radikon Ribolla 的2017年份这个年份。这一款 Ribolla Gialla 呢是Radikon 的旗舰款。首先呢，它有更多的阳光，以及它在这个面朝东南的山坡上面，所以它的无论是太阳光还是这个朝向都会有更多的成熟度。那么另外一个呢，就是它的土壤因为这种土壤呢是叫做 Ponca soil， 这一种土壤呢是非常富含高的这个 percentage 的粘土。以及呢它的矿物质非常的多，所以呢在这种土壤当中种出来的 Ribolla Gialla 呢，它的复杂度也更高。在15年前你们可以看到的，我们在今天这个 Oslavia 的最特级甜的这些 Ribolla Gialla 呢，全部都是在山坡上种植的。那么说到最后呢，我们提一嘴，就是 Ribolla Gialla 的酿造手法在 Radikon 这边，它因为是一个皮非常厚的品种，所以在 Radikon 呢，我们会延长它的浸皮时间。那浸皮时间的延长就会带来白葡萄酒会有更多的单宁感，更多的集中度、颜色和风味，这些也是让我们今天喝到的 Ribolla 2017年的这一款大家可以品尝到更多的这些风味物质的一个重要原因。
So this Ribolla Gialla, the 2017, how long does it stay on the skins, and then how long does it stay in oak?
For the Ribolla, in general, we do between 2 and 4 months skin contact. This depends a lot of the vintage, of the maturity of the grapes, of the ripeness of the grapes, and basically it's always around this particular Ribolla 2017 stays 3 months skin contact, and then after that 3 years in oak. big oak barrels. We use 3,000 liters barrels, then they are quite big. And after that, at least it stays 1.5 years in bottle before we start to sell. Then after the harvest, 4.5 years after the harvest, the wine was released.
Okay.
Perfect.
我们先来说一下Radikon Ribolla 的2017年这一款呢，我们今天为大家争取到了10支的配额。如果感兴趣的观众可以在屏幕下方点击赏原知味这一个企业微信，然后呢，我们的小助手会把酒款的链接推送给大家。今天呢，这一款我们的平时的售价是890元，今天呢只要520就可以买到这一款 Ribolla 的旗舰款了。那么这一款比较有特点的，我们来介绍一下。第一个呢是我们最少的skin contact， 就是浸皮的时间是4年半，然后呢之后会进250到300升的这个木桶去陈年，那么在木桶陈年之后，还会在这个平陈至少1.5年，就是1年半左右的时间。所以呢Radikon 可谓是这个一点点都不会因为说要赶紧上市，然后赶紧出手卖掉它的酒，而是它一定会陈年足够的时间，让这款酒已经非常好喝、非常易饮的时候它才会舍得卖给各位。所以我觉得这种精神本身就是非常令人感动的。
And so if you had to describe a good Ribolla Gialla wine, what should it remind you of? What should it be? Its aromas, its flavors?
The Ribolla Gialla, it's still a nice grape. It's not very aromatic. Then it's giving a lot of taste and flavors. But what I feel about Ribolla, it's always having in maceration. This is what I like. I always feel a little bit of dry fruits like apricot but even almonds and things like that. But you can even feel the acidity and the freshness of herbs. Even in the nose, you can feel different spices like timo and things like that. This is more or less what I feel about my wine.
Yeah.
Ribolla.
Yeah. So it's a beautiful white wine. Usually has these notes of citrus fruits, of crystallized citrus fruits, almonds, almond paste even, very fresh because Ribolla Gialla is a high acid grape. That's why some people want to make sparkling wine with it, but that's a shame because it's a noble grape and it really gives its best as a classic dry wine or a macerated wine.
Ribolla Gialla 这一款经典常青的旗舰款，首先你喝到它的时候，就是它的香气就是非常的诱人，是有很多的果干然后还有这些黄桃，包括烤杏仁的香味。然后呢，喝到嘴里，因为 Ribolla Gialla 这种葡萄品种本身是非常高酸的，也是这个原因，它为什么是我们的贵族品种。那么当你有着非常高的酸度，但是它同时又有这些香料的味道，然后果香又非常浓郁，集中度非常的高，然后因为浸皮的原因，它有很多的这种单宁感，然后会有一些让你觉得这个酒其实它虽然是柔软的，但是它包着一个铁拳在里面，所以你喝的时候就是这个再加一杯，再加一杯。
And then we have this very special other Ribolla Gialla wine today, which is from the 2007 vintage. So it's 10 years older. 2007 literally means that this is a 15-year-old wine today, and it's called Ribolla 3781. Tell us a little bit about this amazing new wine.
This is the Ribolla 3781. It's basically a harvest selection of the best grapes of one single vineyard. The vineyard, which is just under the house and under the original vineyard of my grandfather. Basically, half of this vineyard, it's really on the ponca, it's very high, then the soil is very low, and the vines, they grow very slowly. They are very low in nitrogen, then they really need to fight to grow up, but they always give a lot of good grapes. Then these grapes are basically every year vinified separate from the others, because we know that historically this grape is giving a little bit something more. Then vinification is exactly the same, 3 months on the skins and 3 years in oak. But when it's the moment of the bottling, we taste these wines together with the others to understand if it's really better and it's having a better aging potential. And if it is, we bottle the wine separate and we age longer time in bottle.
OK， 我们接下来呢，先来介绍一下酒庄的一个限量配额珍藏首发，也是今天直播间当中中国的朋友们第一次可以买到这个酒的唯一的方式，就是在我们的直播间。那么这一款呢叫做3781啊，3781是什么意思呢？其实它是在 Oslavia 这个最好的一块特级田的名字，它也是一个单一田啊，这个是这块田的编号，就叫做3781。那么今天我们在直播间的下方，大家可以点击下面的1号酒款，就可以购买到这一款我们今天直播间的首发酒款了。这一款呢是非常有来头的一款。首先呢，它是在海拔的山坡上，所以呢朝南，阳光充足，然后又有非常好的通风，所以呢它可以避免说葡萄在有一些雨后的病菌啊等等。然后呢，同时这个也是老庄主 Stanko Radikon 他当时还在世的时候参与酿造的一款酒。因为他是在16年去世的，然后呢，在07年这个一个特殊的年份，也被誉为是这个最近10年当中最好的年份之一，所以它当时降雨比较少，然后带来的这个果实的成熟度也非常的高。那么另外一点呢 ，Sasha 刚刚提到的就是这一款因为是在 Ponca Soil 这个特殊的土壤当中的，然后呢，这种 Ponca Soil 它是有一些略微的氮胁迫，所以葡萄在 Ponca Soil 成长的过程当中，它其实是这个成长期是非常非常的缓慢的。这种缓慢的成长期可以有利于葡萄有更多的集中度，然后你去喝它的时候，它的酸度又是非常的好，所以它的陈年潜力可谓巨大。Okay.
And the 3781 is a reference to the single vineyard?
It's a reference, yeah, it's the parcel number.
Yeah. And so
you can see the parcel on the label.
Yeah, yeah.
The parcel is written on the label, yeah.
Yeah. It's a very different wine from the Ribolla Gialla 2017. The 3781 is very much like almost an Oloroso sherry. Or here in China, we have a really great yellow wine from Shaoxing, and it really reminds you of that. It really does for our listeners. This Ribolla 3781 is like a remarkably great yellow wine, or even an Oloroso sherry. Why is it so different? Is it just because of the aging and the source of the grapes, or something else?
It is a part is because of the aging, absolutely, and a part is because in 2007 the maceration was a bit different than. I mean, we used to have skin contact for the same period, but the open vats was last for longer time. Now we try to close the vats as soon as we can. In that period, we used to have it a bit more open because the extraction is a bit different. But in 2007, the concentration was very high, and then you need to macerate a bit longer and to make it a little bit different. Absolutely, the extraction during the harvest, it's maybe different, more intense, because even the grapes are a little bit more ripe than generally they're a little bit more ripe compared to the 17.
Gotcha.
那么今天我们为大家带来的 Radikon 的3781这一款老年份的07年，这一款07年呢，我们为大家争取的限量配额是8支，大家可以点击屏幕下方的这个 bubble 来购买。这一款今天晚上平时的售价是2600元，今天晚上的特殊价格呢是1780元。那么这一款限量的配额刚才伊恩问了一个问题，就是它和17年的那一款的区别在哪里？那么当然，它首先是这一款的成年，它是在Slavonia 的大桶当中成年4年，然后呢再评成了10年之后，在2022年，也就是今年才上市，刚刚上市的一款。它的浸皮时间呢是3到4个月左右，然后比起前面的一款，也就是我们酒庄的这个经典旗舰款来说，这一款的复杂度更高，而且呢，它的这个集中感，甚至于刚刚伊恩也提到说，他刚刚喝的时候会闻到一种近乎于氧化黄酒的香气，因为它确实在鼻尖的香气是有一些咸鲜感在里面的，因为它的复杂度真的非常的高。我当时喝到的时候，第一反应就是天哪，这个是我今年喝到最好喝的橙酒。那么Sasha 刚才跟我们分享，它的在这款酒在酿造过程当中呢，它会更多的去用open vats 这个手法，就是说开罐发酵。那么这个因素呢是考虑到了去结合酒的这种结构，然后它可以让酒有更多的这种对于风土的表现力。所以这个也是庄主在酿造过程当中对于酒的一个理解和它最终表现出来的让每个人都非常喝到非常非常棒的酒款，非常感谢他。
Ottimo. 3781, the first year you made is the 2007, right?
Yeah, it's a wine which we don't do every year, every vintage. We only do in the vintages where it's possible to do it. And the 2007 was the first vintage where we started to do this. 2008 is another vintage. Then we have a few vintages we don't have. Then there's something, but not every year, absolutely. And yeah, it's only a small production, only 2,500 bottles in total. And it's a very tiny thing.
Okay. And made from the best grapes of that single vineyard. Yeah.
那么这一款酒另外一点是它的产量非常低，只有2500瓶的产量。然后大家如果看到我们的这个瓶子的话，对，我们可以在观众可以看一下这个瓶子，它也是一个蓝标，然后上面有一些橘色的纹路。那么这个橘色里面就是3781这一块单一元所在的位置。这一款酒，我们刚刚提到的是它的这个，对，那个 Andrew 又说这个很像绍兴酒或者是鲁拉黄酒，就有一些陈皮的那种香气。相信你已经喝过这款酒了，那这个今天我们也是为大家带来这个8瓶的限量。也谢谢小明会族。那么这款就是我们特别有特点的单一元，为大家带来的单一元的 Ribolla。
Okay, so those are the two Ribolla Giallas. Then we have the Tokai Friulano, or the Jacot, which is Tokai spelled backwards. As the listeners know, the word Tokai can now only be used by Hungary to describe their wines made with Furmint and Harzlevelu from the Tokai region of Hungary, and in fact, a small piece in Slovakia too. And so this is called Jakot in honor of the Tokai name that was long used in Friuli Venezia Giulia to describe this grape. I have to say that the 2017 Jakot is really a lovely wine. I really loved it. We tried it today, and it's one of our favorite wines. I think it's one of the, for some reason, it's one of the nicer ones you've made recently.
Tokai Friulano, it's an amazing grape. Together with Ribolla, it's a really important local variety. I think that in one way, Ribolla and Tokai Friulano, they are complementary, because if I have now to plant a vineyard, the highest part I plant with Ribolla, but the lowest part I plant with Tokai Friulano, which stays very well, even if the weather is a bit more cold and a little bit more wet. It is fine. I mean, it really stays very well. It needs to be treated properly. Then you should clean a little bit out the leaves and all the stuff. But it's still a semi-aromatic grape. It's coming from a family of Sauvignon, even if it's basically born in Friuli. It's not connected completely, but it's still the family of Sauvignons. Then this flavor, it's in these aromatic grapes, it's always in the skins, and the skin contact is giving the chance to extract all these flavors. And if we're lucky and good to preserve them till the wine, they can give very, very good results for the Tokai Friulano. I think the 17 is one of my favorite Tokais at the end now too.
Mm-hmm. 我们先来说一下我们的屏幕下方的这一款 Tokai Friulano 的，也是我们今天的第3号酒款，对，没错，是第3号酒款。它呢叫做 Jakot。然后首先 Jakot 这个名字的来源啊，这一款呢是有100%的当地的葡萄品种，叫做 Friulano Tokai 这种葡萄品种。那么这种葡萄品种呢，因为它在匈牙利是法定产区名称啊，所以其他的产区是不被允许使用的。那么所以当时呢，酒庄庄主就想出了这个一个法子，就是将 Tokai 的名字倒写过来，就是 KAJ，然后呢变成 JAKOT， 我觉得非常有创造性，而且非常可爱的一个想法，特别好记。那么 Jakot 这个它是浸皮了2到4个月，然后4年的陈年，因为它不做任何的澄清过滤，所以最终呢可以保留葡萄的最原始的味道。那么Tokai Friulano 这种葡萄品种，我们可以和刚才的 Ribolla 这种当地的葡萄品种来做一个对比。通常呢 Ribolla 是种在山坡上比较高的这个位置，然后 Tokai Friulano 呢，通常你会看到它是在山坡的下坡以及一些平原地带，会看到更多的 Tokai Friulano。那么 Tokai Friulano 呢，它是有非常多的这种芳香的感觉在里面，所以它也是被称作是 semi-aromatic， 就是半芳香型品种。通常它的味道会让你想起白苏维翁这一种葡萄品种，就是我们的长相思。在图片当中呢，大家可以看到它的颜色是非常诱人的金黄色的。然后大家的这一款就是我们今天晚上为大家争取到的配额 Jakot 一共是10支，然后今天晚上直播间的特殊价格是520元。
Yeah, so it's in 217. It's very floral, very fruity, very lively. It's a really delicious wine, and it was really one of our favorite wines when we tried them here.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was really lovely, so juicy, and it's kind of like you want to drink it glass by glass.
It's also for people who maybe haven't visited Friuli yet. It's really, as we were saying earlier, along with Ribolla, it is really the emblem, the symbol of Friuli, Venezia Giulia, viticulture, and wines. Every time you walk into a osteria or a gustilnia in Friuli, Venezia Giulia, the house wine, when they give you a taiut, it's almost always going to be either Tokai Friulano or Ribolla Gialla. And so they really are the two grapes and the two wines that symbolize Friuli Venezia Giulia, very much a part of the tradition and the history and the present day reality of the region.
如果大家想要深入的了解 Friuli Venezia Giulia 这一块产区的话，那么 Ribolla Gialla 和 Tokai Friulano 这个两种经典品种也是一定不能错过的，因为它就是这个产区当中精华中的精华。今天我们为大家同时也带来了这个两款葡萄品种啊，所以我相信今天在我们直播间的小伙伴们，都不可错过，然后你们都来对了。
What do you like about Tokai Friulano? What do you like about your wine? How would you compare it to your Ribolla? The two 2017s. Would you eat different things with them, for example?
Yes, I think that Ribolla, in one thing, it's much more adaptable to not very spicy food. Then you should meet it like fish without any big condition, maybe any big spicy. But Tokai Friulano can stay with a little bit more stronger food, even like I can imagine a very good risotto with sea products, fish, but even mussels and things like that, which is a little bit more juicy and a little bit more strong in flavor. Richer flavors. Yeah, and then I'd even like to have Tokai in particular with a good salami, which is always a nice idea. A bottle of wine and a few slices of salami.
That's right. It's very typical in Friuli Venezia Giulia when they have Friuli Venezia Giulia is one of the best places in Italy for prosciutto, and it's a region that has many different very good prosciuttos. The most famous is San Daniele, but of course there's also Sauris and many others, and Tokai is often drunk along with that. So here in China, for example, Ribolla Gialla would match well with Zhejiang or Taizhou cuisine, while the Tokai Friulano can stand up to a richer, even sweeter cuisine, Shanghainese or Cantonese would go well. And of course, the Yunnan ham would work very well with Yakut.
Thank you very much, Ian. You have been very localized now. Yeah. For Ribolla Gialla, 我们刚才聊到的是这个两种葡萄品种，我们怎么来配餐。首先 Ribolla Gialla 呢，Sasha 和 Ian 都同时推荐了比较偏清淡的一些口味的食物，包括鱼啊，然后泰州或者是浙江菜系的这种比较清淡，那么像粤菜也是比较清淡的这种菜系。那么 Tokai Friulano 呢，它其实是更饱满，然后呢酒体更强大的这样一个品种，所以呢我们推荐大家可以去试一些更加圆润或者是更多的这个像 salami 或者是火腿，然后包括像云南菜系这些稍微偏重口味一点或者是更浓油赤酱一点的菜系会更加搭。
Okay. And then last but not least, your red wine is, of course, the Merlot. People need to realize that Merlot has been growing in Friuli Venezia Giulia for something like 300 years. it is not really an international variety in Friuli Venezia Giulia. It is more correct to consider it a traditional variety of the region because it's been there forever. Cabernet Franc, Pinot Bianco, Pinot Blanc, Pinot Grigio, Sauvignon. These are all traditional varieties of Friuli Venezia Giulia because they've been there for a very long time. In fact, Chardonnay and Cabernet Sauvignon were much more recent arrivals, and they're probably more international than the other ones. So Merlot has always been in the region. It has always been used, and it's normal for Friuli people to walk into a bar or a wine bar, a bistro, and have a glass of Merlot. It's just as common as Schioppettino or Pignolo or other varieties that are Refoscos that are native to the region. So Merlot has always been in Friuli Venezia Giulia, and historically it's made very good wines there. Your Merlot, how old is it? When did you first plant it?
When my grandfather asked for a red wine, he was always thinking about Merlot. And when he wants a red wine, he wants the Merlot. We always had some Merlot. Originally, the vineyard which we have now, near close to the cellar, it's a reproduction of another vineyard which was probably planted just after World War II or something like that. And this vineyard is not anymore, but we take the material from that vineyard and we put in this new vineyard. And this is why we always had Merlot. Our Merlots are a bit different than usual Merlot because what we think about red wine, in particular with Merlot, we want them long aging wines, and we even release them very late. Then it is like to have this thing because we really need to age the wines in barrels. Then the maceration is not very long. It's always around 30, 40 days. But the aging is 4, 5, 6 years sometimes in old barriques, small volumes because, we have smaller volumes of reds, then we use smaller barrels. 6 years then bottle.
OK， 今天晚上我们为大家带来的也是唯一一款红呢，是由梅洛酿造的，然后也是我们在今天的这一款就是06年的这一款梅洛。这一款的梅洛呢，今天为大家争取的同样是10支，它的售价是880元，原价是1200元。然后这款梅洛，刚才 Sasha 有提到的一点呢，是它其实早在2战时期已经有这个种植下去了。当然，今天有很多就是已经被重新种植，所以在差不多1.5公顷左右的这个比较小的比例的红因为酒庄其实更多的是出产更多的白。以及更多的当地品种，所以梅洛作为一种国际品种来说，其实是比例占的会相对而言更少一些。那么，但是呢 ，Radikon 其实它做的梅洛和其他酒庄的梅洛是完完全全不是一个风格，或者是当你喝到这款梅洛的时候，你不会想到这是一款普通的梅洛，因为第一个你喝到这款梅洛的感觉就是它是非常适合成年的，而且在最初你闻它的时候呢，其实它的香气是富有着非常多的果干以及甜美的感觉。那么 Sasha 在酿造这一款梅洛的时候，第一是它用了非常长的浸皮时间，同时呢它用了差不多6年的时间在更小的橡木桶当中陈年。那么酒庄因为考虑到梅洛也就是红葡萄品种的这一个比例更少一些，所以他们也用了更小的橡木桶来做陈年，然后所有的这些 酒庄都是希望可以把这款梅洛做成一款易于陈年，并且呢能够长时间去存放的一款富有潜力的伟大的红而不是一款非常易饮，然后让大家一喝就忘记的这一款酒。所以我相信，今天能在直播间购买到这一款酒，如果大家开瓶之后去试的话，绝对是会超出你的想象。
So what are the characteristics of a good Friuli Venezia Giulia Merlot, and in particular yours that is a long time on the skins?
I mean, you mean the grapes? They should be completely ripe, and then the extraction is very high. We arrive to the maturation, to the picking of Merlot, which is almost the berries are going to be very dry. Then an extraction is very good, very important. The stems are generally almost completely ripe too. Then we always destem, but it is possible to use the stems many times, even if, basically I don't like it too much, but I prefer to destem. But the grapes are very intense, very fruity, and then the wine results very intense too. The maceration, it's always quite long because after you have this concentration on grapes, you need to extract a bit longer for the wines. Then the aging is giving the character of the almost, on the way of oxidative wines, and we like to have them in that part. Then after that, we need the freshness and the acidity in the mouth, and the mouth is much more fresher because this is what we like, what we do.
And it is true, the Merlots of Friuli Venezia Giulia are much fresher and livelier than, for example, the Super Tuscans that people may have tasted, which are richer and fleshier. The Merlots of Friuli Venezia Giulia are very food friendly because they're lighter and will go very well with oily and greasy foods.
这一款梅洛呢，刚才我们有提到的是，就是你闻上去其实是非常甜美的果干的这种感觉。刚才 Sasha 也解答了我心中的疑惑，因为呢，他提到了这一款梅洛，第一是他会保证说，这一些梅洛是有非常达到非常好的成熟度。第二呢，它会稍微的有一些就是在这个葡萄藤上面挂枝，然后有一点点果干的这种感觉。然后第三呢，它还用了一些梗，也就是带梗发酵。那么它的梗会确保说它所有的梗都是完完全全达到了成熟度的。所以这个也是一方面的原因。你们会闻到这种非常成熟、非常甜美，但是同时呢，就是非常诱人的这种红果香气。那么第二呢，Sasha 有提到的就是他选择的长浸皮时间以及统陈和平陈的时间。那么这种方式可以让这个也解答了，当我们喝这款酒的时候，我当时感觉到的就是它不仅是有非常顺滑的酒体，同时呢，它也有这些果干啊，然后肉桂可可，甚至于一些雪松和岩茶的这种感觉，整体是非常饱满的。然后你可以体会到它在你口腔当中那种绵密的、细长并且非常柔软的单宁感。同时这款酒刚刚燕也提到，就是非常适合佐餐，因为它余味同时也非常的长它的酸度、它的结构感非常的好，所以不想错过这款酒的话呢，我们可以在屏幕下方拍下这个第四号06年的这一款梅洛。Okay.
Good. Is there something else you'd like to say about your estate or your wines that you think is important?
Well, I think we touched all the important points of what we think. I think that future will be more or less the same. Then we are working on a lot of different projects, and still keep going with the orange wines. And in the same way, trying to understand to the DOC that orange wines are important. Then slowly, hopefully, the wines will be all DOC. That's it.
Good.
Sure. We have one question from our audience, Julia. 谢谢你的提问。他呢，有问到一个问题，我觉得这个问题也非常好啊，不妨来请教一下我们自然酒的大神。这个问题我相信也是很困惑很多爱好者的一个问题，就是为什么我们在一个非常低流的情况下，还可以让它保持它生命力？It's a question that we would love to kind of have your answers as you are the top of the natural wine or orange wine. So our audience, Julia, asked, how do you make sure to make and preserve the wine in a very in adding very low percentage of SO2, for example, and to make sure it will last a very, very long time of potential aging? And could you elaborate and tell us more about your philosophy?
Okay, yeah, SO2 is something which is still very important on one way. I think that we are able to make wines without adding SO2 for the first thing because the grapes, they should be ripe, they should be healthy, and once the grapes are healthy, it's easier to have a good fermentation. All our fermentation are spontaneous, and we try to keep all the different vineyards separate them, because I think if you treat it well, you can have a very good fermentations and very good results if you don't add nothing more than just the SO2. It's a consequence. Then if there's some SO2 which is coming out with the yeasts during the fermentation, and if the wines are good and the things goes well, this SO2 is basically protecting the wine during all the aging. Then we analyze sometimes how to understand how it's going. The thing is, if you have the contact with the skins, you have some tannins which helps you to preserve the wine. And this SO2, if you have some SO2 before bottling, you know that basically you didn't lose any. And if you didn't lose any, the wine is able to protect itself without any added sulfur. It is more complicated than it looks, but it is basically the healthy grapes gives wines without sulfur. More the grapes are touched by botrytis or whatever, more you need to add.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. 我相信 Sasha 非常好的回答了这个问题，就是 Julia 讲的这个问题。就是第一个非常重要的点，就是在于我们需要确保说葡萄的非常非常完美的成熟度，以及它是非常健康的葡萄。因为有一些葡萄，如果它会有一些霉菌，或者是它没有那么健康的话，确实在不得已的情况下，酒庄需要加一定量的二氧化硫来保证整个酒液不被破坏，或者是它可以有更长的持久度。那么这个是第一，就是葡萄的健康程度，也是重中之重，可以说是解释了为什么我们甚至于90%以上所有的最重要的关键点都在于葡萄本身。然后第二个呢，就在于就是其实在酿造过程当中，这个酵母发酵的时候，它是会产生一定量的二氧化硫来保证葡萄的这个确保它其实是可以做一定时间的陈年的。然后当然 Sasha 也解释了，其实整个在从 发酵到陈酿过程当中，再到后期，其实有非常复杂的化学反应，包括你用的桶啊，可能它也会有一些，如果你用二氧化硫去消毒啊等等，其实是会有很多综合方面的原因的。但是最重要的重中之重呢，是如果葡萄本身足够的健康的话，它其实是有足够的单宁和酸度去保证它的陈年潜力的。也非常感谢Julia，同时呢，我们也要感谢天工艺也感谢他们对我们的支持。那么今天的所有的酒款，如果大家感兴趣的话呢，可以在屏幕下方，并且呢加我们的企业微信小助手，这样的话你就可以就是找到这个推送链接啊，然后来进行购买。Yeah, thank you so much.
Grazie mille, allora. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you much for us.
It's a real pleasure for us.
And thanks very much.
The wines are great. Your estate is very famous. It's well known here in China too. It's well known all over the world. So thank you very much. We hope to come see you soon enough in Friuli Venezia Giulia. I should be there hopefully in the early part of the next year when travel finally is allowed, and I'll gladly come by the winery. And so in the meantime, grazie. And in the meantime, I guess just Mandi. Ciao, ciao, ciao.
We are very glad to see you here again. And I still remember in Terroir Symposium that we saw you there, and it has been like 1 or 2 years, or almost 2 or 3 years, like since the COVID. So we are really looking forward when you can come back to China. And
that would be great.
Yeah,
that would be nice.
And we will be looking forward to meet you in the winery.
Okay, waiting for you at the winery, and I hope I can be back in China as soon as I can.
Yes, please.
We would like you to come.
You're most welcome here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Have a good night.好的，